Now, open world games have gained immense popularity in the gaming industry, captivating players with vast virtual landscapes and seemingly limitless possibilities. And over the last few years, probably for a decade now, we've seen the explosion of more and more open world games. But today I'm here to discuss a little bit on maybe some things that open world games could learn from the linear games model. Because open world games, for me, they can learn valuable lessons from linear games, which are more structured and guided experiences. Now, as these games have grown in scope and size, there's a growing argument that they could definitely benefit from being smaller in size. And again, this is something I've mentioned on this channel before time and time again, with the example of empty, soulless Ubisoft games. And I know I pick on Ubisoft a lot of the time, but it does apply to a lot of different publishers. It's not just Ubisoft. So again, this video, I'm going to discuss the potential advantages of reducing the scale of open world games, as well as focusing on how studios can maybe enhance player engagement, improve their narrative depth, and probably optimize their development resources a bit better. But going back to that point about linear games, and the reason why I mentioned linear games is because there are some games that are somewhat quasi-open world where they let you explore the environments, they let you wander around a little bit, but they still maintain you in, a focused narrative driven path that you kind of have to follow. And those games come with their pros and cons. Now, as I just mentioned, strong narrative focus. Now for me, when it comes to the open world games versus linear games, I think linear games often excel in delivering compelling narratives with well-defined characters and tightly woven storylines. Whereas, you see, open world games, they can benefit from incorporating a similar focus in terms of just the narrative depth and character development. And the reason why I say this is because sometimes we get lost, right? In an open world, we get lost doing side quests, we get lost doing side missions, and then often you come back and it makes everything else feel a lot hollow or a lot shallow. And to pick on another game, Cyberpunk 2077, as much as I love that game, there was sort of a disconnect between what was going on in the world and what the story had laid out to us, where, for example, V, our character, he was on a ticking clock. He had to rush to basically get the biochip out of his head, whatever, to get Johnny Silverhand, right? So that he didn't die. But throughout the game, there's moments where you get given these missions that are just completely they're not like time sensitive. They're not really connected to the narrative. They just feel like endless fluff that was just added into the game. So they were nice and fun side missions, but they didn't tie into the story, right? For example, so you'd have cases where if you dealt with a certain side mission at the wrong time that the game didn't want you to deal with it, you would get like awkward dialogue, or you'd get an awkward message like on your phone that was maybe supposed to occur in a different phase of the game or a different scene, but because you did the side mission in like a different order or whatnot, it kind of just derailed everything. So that's something that I feel like open world games need to also take from linear games, and sort of shortening that scope a little bit to be able to condense everything, into one story that's able to flow a bit better. And again, by investing in a strong narrative framework, open world games can provide players with a more immersive and memorable storytelling experience. Now we go back to pacing and flow, like I just mentioned, to be able to condense everything so that it flows like one long story. You don't have these huge gaps or these awkward cutscenes and dialogue where maybe something happens that wasn't supposed to happen. So again, linear games are carefully designed to control the pacing and flow of gameplay, ensuring that players are constantly engaged and progressing through the story at a satisfying pace. Whereas open world games, they don't really have pacing mechanisms. They don't have like a sense of momentum. You can go long stretches of just aimless wandering. because the quests aren't necessarily structured. The events and dynamic encounters happen randomly, whereas you can have them, maintain a certain level of player engagement and prevent the game from becoming repetitive or stagnant without necessarily locking the player down, right, to the rigidness of a linear game. And then we move on to meaningful choices and consequences. Now, linear games often present players with meaningful choices that impact the storyline and character development, whereas open world games, they just have an element of, having so many things that aren't consequential. Like I was mentioning in the Cyberpunk example, where maybe you could kill an NPC at the wrong time, and so when you reach a certain mission, you now have dialogue from like a dead person, where maybe that was something that was not supposed to happen again in the story. So I feel like open world games can essentially borrow an element of incorporating more consequential decision making within the expansive world. We kind of saw The Witcher incorporate this. We saw Red Dead Redemption 2 incorporate this by allowing players to basically make choices that have tangible consequences rather than just choices that have a consequence in the moment, but then you an hour or 2 hours later down the game, it's just, it takes away that sense of agency and personal investment. Now, refined gameplay mechanics. This one is a bit more broad, I would say, because linear games typically have, honed in gameplay mechanics that are catered to specified needs of the story and gameplay progression, whereas open world games kind of hold your hand in the moments that they have to, like in certain cutscenes, in certain like button prompt sequences, that kind of thing. So I do think for this point of mine, open world games can benefit from adopting this approach, but they don't necessarily have to like stick by it. This is where something you can get around by just refining combat, refining the traversal, and tweaking other gameplay systems. That way open world games can provide a more polished and satisfying player experience. Now, to my original point about enhanced player engagement and narrative depth. Now, one of the primary advantages, right, I would think, of smaller open world games is the potential for more enhanced player engagement. Because when open worlds become too vast, they can feel overwhelming and lack a sense of purpose, right? Whereas you want to avoid players becoming lost, players becoming disoriented, and sort of struggling to find meaningful content, right, to progress the game. Whereas by reducing the size of the open world, developers can basically concentrate on creating a more, again, concentrated and focused experience, ensuring that every corner of the game basically has purpose. And again, the streamlining will allow for a denser world, right, where players can actively explore and interact with a greater variety of engaging content. And again, I always bring the example of Red Dead Redemption 2 because that's a game where the world feels alive. It doesn't feel like it's just, running at its own pace, or it's just automated or everything, which again, it is automated, but it feels like every action you have with the NPCs that you interact with, you can basically disrupt their day. You can affect what's going on throughout the day. It feels like there's humans controlling them, right? When you play Red Dead Redemption 2 in the story mode, you could swear that you're playing online with like a bunch of players. The NPCs don't feel like NPCs because they feel like they have a sense of purpose. Now, on my final point about the narrative depth, I feel like large open world games often struggle to maintain a cohesive and compelling narrative, again, due to the sheer size of the world and the multitude of side quests and distractions. Like I've said, more hours in your game doesn't equate to a better game, right? And it can equate to like a better experience. Sure, we have 200 hours of the game or we have 150 hours, but that doesn't mean you're getting 150 quality hours. You're probably getting maybe 20 quality hours and the rest of it is just fluff. So again, by reducing the size of the open world, I feel like developers can basically allocate resources more effectively towards crafting a rich and immersive narrative. Like I said, make every interaction meaningful, make the world feel dense so that it doesn't feel like empty. And again, a smaller world allows for more intricate storytelling more intricate character development, and meaningful player choices. Again, that buzzword that I use, player choices. It enables the game's narrative to be tightly woven with the gameplay, right? Resulting in a more memorable and impactful experience. Again, that's just in my opinion. Now, I think incorporating all these elements from linear games can basically help open world games strike a balance. And again, with this essay, I don't mean to say open world games should change their formula or anything like that, but I feel like they definitely do need to strike a balance between freedom and structure, where they're able to provide players with more focused and engaging experiences within these expansive worlds, right? Where you're able to feel the world come alive rather than have the world feel like it's just a bunch of endless side quests in no direction. It's just filler content. So again, by drawing inspiration from the strengths of linear games, open world games can continue to evolve and captivate players with immersive narratives, memorable moments, and refined gameplay. Let me know in the comments, do you agree with me? Do you think some open world games should be smaller? Again, my point is it doesn't apply to all open world games, but I feel like there's some that could benefit from being smaller. Or are you actually someone who just likes massive open worlds with like 150 hours worth of missions? Again, Dying Light 2 is another example where there was like 100 hours worth of content, but maybe 17 of that 100 hours was actually worthwhile content. So again, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this little essay. It's another one of these smaller essays that I'm doing. I figured these would be a little more digestible rather than, you know, my longer essays. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, stay dangerous, stay blessed. Don't forget to leave a like on your way out. Peace out.
I just bet the twins of the senator had you in there stuffed and mounted.
Hey, I want a cut of that.
Hey, Cal, if you die, I get the mantis, right?
Sorry, Gabs. Not mine to get.
Right there. Imagine having to put down your own brother.
Oh my god.
Oh. Died last time. Come on, let's go. Woo. Let's go. It's those father-son moments again. Oh, but now Freya's here as well.
That if you just build great games, everything would turn around.
And then the great games point is the one that I wanted to argue against heavily, because what is the point of your console if it's not for games? Like, what is the point of having a console if you're just gonna do Game Pass and cloud gaming? Like